Everyone, and welcome to Democracy Demythologized, where we talk about different issues democracy faces around the world. Today, I'm talking with a doctor who has worked in Gaza for a bit, and he does a lot of humanitarian medical work, and we're going to be talking about the medical and humanitarian situation in Gaza, particularly in like 2024 and 2025 during the kind of the heat of the conflict there. And we happened to be filming it the day we recorded it, happened to be when the very day that the US and Israel started striking Iran. So we're going to be talking about that as well, because it had happened like a couple hours before we started. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. So in case you're wondering, I'm currently in North Maluku in Ternate in Indonesia. This is Mount Kalamata. This is an active volcano. Maybe that's a good metaphor for the Palestinian people, having to kind of chill next to an active volcano that has been known to erupt every couple years. So I'm kind of making that up, but it just kind of popped in my head. But I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. How are you doing today?
Good. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. So you're a medical doctor. I've talked with a lot of, academic doctors, but you're a medical doctor. You've done a lot of work in humanitarian medicine. Do you maybe want to give a high level of what you do?
Yeah, I'm a trauma surgeon. I work in California, east of the Bay Area, in a kind of rough and tumble town. But the work I'm better known for is the humanitarian work that I do, which is I work in places like Gaza and Ukraine. I'll be going to Ethiopia soon, trying to figure out some way to go back to Gaza. I was blocked from entering in November, so that's been frustrating. But yeah, no, some people call it humanitarian surgical work. You can come up with all sorts of names for it. But that's the kind of work that I do in my professional life. And then when it comes to Palestine and U.S. politics specifically, I speak a lot about what I saw in Palestine, what other healthcare workers have seen, what it means, what the U.S. is doing there, things like that.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Now, just as a quick side, do you like calling it humanitarian medical work, or do you have a preferred phrase for it?
No, I don't care. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a preferred phrase for it. I don't. I'm not part of the language police, so anybody can call it whatever they want.
Yeah, there we go. I guess there's just different phrases for things. It's
yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's get you. You've worked in a number of countries. I am curious about Ukraine and Ethiopia. Like, I've recently had a conversation with someone from Ethiopia who does a lot of talking about some of the conflicts there. But let's talk about let's talk about Palestine. Let's talk about Gaza. So you've been, I'm going to say, in the last year, you've been to the area. You've been to both Gaza. It seems like sometimes you also only go to Israel if you can't get access to Gaza. What's it been like working as a doctor there?
Yeah. So just so there's no confusion, I actually was planning. So I was supposed to go to Gaza in November, and I was blocked. So I stayed in Jordan for like 2.5 weeks. And the whole trip to Gaza was only supposed to be 3 weeks. So after 2.5 weeks, I was like, well, if I haven't gotten in now, I'm not going to get in. The Israelis were blocking me. There's just not much I can really do about that. I am suing the Israeli government over it right now with some other people, but that's a different matter. But anyway, so after the trip, I actually had already been asked to come give some unofficial seminars by Israeli professors that I know. Some of them are Israeli Jews, some of them are Palestinians who live in Israel. And So I was planning on doing that anyway. Yeah, but yeah, the last time I was in Gaza was March and April of 2025, last year, and I was there. When I got there, it was March 2nd. Or no, what am I talking about? Sorry, at that point, a ceasefire had been declared in early January, I think, or mid January. It was like January 19th, I think, between the Palestinian armed factions and the Israelis. And on March 2nd, the Israelis completely closed the border, which incidentally they did yesterday as well. No food, nothing going in, absolutely nothing whatsoever.
Oh, and one other thing, because when I post this might be different from when we're doing the recording. It would be March 1st, 2026.
Yes, yeah. So exactly. So on March 2nd, on March 2nd of last year, they closed the border to the entry of all things, just like they did, almost exactly a year ago now. I didn't even think of that. So I entered on March 6th. And then on March 18th is when the ceasefire was blown up. March 18th was this massive bombing campaign. So the first half of the time I was there, or the first half that I was there, was ceasefire time and more of like a normal routine of work, if you would say it that way. And then the second half was the total chaos that you'd imagine in the middle of a slaughter.
Yeah. What did it feel like there? Like, what was it, as a doctor, like what kind of things did you see, or what did you see as some of the kind of biggest needs or the biggest kind of complexities in terms of medical care in the
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is it's impossible to provide medical care in a situation like this. We, like just March 18th is a good example. So Nasser Medical Complex is by far the best off hospital in all of Gaza since the destruction of Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. And it's about, I think it's a 230, 250 bed hospital, something like that. So a little bit bigger than the hospital I work at in California, actually. And, it's kind of got a trauma system. Like there's a blood bank. There's a way for the emergency room to alert the whole hospital if there's a mass casualty event, stuff like that. Like a big siren that just goes off. But these hospitals are operating under siege, and they've been deprived of everything they need to function. Clean water is an uncertainty. Electricity is an uncertainty. You have no idea what medications are actually available in the hospital, what supplies are available, how, like we were using sutures that had expired 5 years ago, quite literally, which, sometimes that'll work just fine, and other times it probably won't. There's no sterility in the hospital. It's impossible to keep anything clean. There aren't even really cleaning supplies available usually. Soap is a luxury. Like I mentioned, running water is sometimes not available. So, I'm a doctor, so I go there to do doctor things, but it's kind of honestly silly to discuss medical care in Gaza in that sense, because it's, the whole society has just been so radically destroyed that, a hospital is one of those like higher level things in society. It's like a university or like a factory or something like that. It's not something that can function if you don't have a sewage system and water and electricity, like the basics of life, if food is inconsistently available, or even in our case, not available at all, these things are all going to undermine human health far more than a hospital can build it back up, especially under those circumstances. But in terms of the actual provision of medical care, that as far as we could, the things that were really missing was supplies and staff. I mean, that's the basics of it. Something like 10% of Gaza's workforce has either been killed, fled, or is in Israeli prisons. The guy that I work with most closely there, Khaled Al-Sayr, when he had just gotten he just finished his fellowship in Britain when he flew back to Gaza, and then the October 7th attacks happened a few days later. So then this huge assault starts. And he spent from, let's see, October to March of, October 2023 to March of 2024, he's working at Nasser Medical Complex. In March, the Israelis raided the hospital and kidnapped him for 6 or 7 months. They torment him, they torture him. He probably lost about 100 pounds. He was a big, chubby guy. He lost about 100 pounds in detention. He comes out, he's covered in scabies. He's lost most of his hair. His dad didn't even recognize him when he came up to him the first time and said, "Dad, I'm out of prison now." Like, he gave him a hug. And then this guy's back a few days later. And, I met him about a year after all of that misery, which is, he'd healed, physically he's healed up, but, and he's doing his job as best he can. But that's, this same guy on March 18th, there's this massive bombing campaign that starts in Gaza. It's a surprise attack. It's Ramadan during that time, like it is now. And this surprise attack happens just as everybody's gathering for the morning meal right before the sun comes up. It's called Sahur. And this bombing campaign is massive. And Khalid is at the front of the hospital doing the triage. So like the ambulances or the donkey carts or whatever are bringing people to the hospital. He looks inside and he says, "Okay, that one's dead. That one's dead. That one can go inside. That one has to wait outside." It's a very, very challenging job. Actually, it takes a lot of, you can imagine it's difficult to make life and death decisions that quickly and there's a line. You have to get through everybody. You have like 10 or 15 seconds per patient to decide what to do. About 45 minutes into that, he was supposed to get married that day, like later in the day. The woman who he was going to marry, her father's body is brought to him. And he looks at him, he says, "He's dead. Take him to the morgue." He stood aside for like 45 seconds, said a prayer, and went back to work for another 12 hours. So like that is what the healthcare workers of Gaza have been dealing with. And it's kind of you hear all the time, like Gaza's healthcare system is at its breaking point. It's at a breaking point, but really it's just been broken. It's a total disaster,
Yeah, I mean, this makes sense. I feel like, that's really sad to see. It's really sad. It seems like it's both difficult to provide adequate care, and it seems like this would also be overwhelming to the doctors. I mean, this person's job also just in and of itself seems super stressful.
Right.
Both emotionally exhausting, having to see so much depth, having to make so many quick decisions. If one thing I'm thinking about is, because you're saying that like hospitals are like they're kind of built on the infrastructure that in this case doesn't exist in Gaza. It seems like even among medical care, it seems like your practice, so surgery, is like even more built on. It's like it's something built on top of hospital systems. Like, were you able to do any type of surgical care, or is that something that just like isn't in the radar given the needs? Like without water, I don't know how you would physically wash necessary to do that, for example.
Yeah, and sometimes you honestly can't, so you just slap Betadine on your hands and hope for the best. But one of the funny things, and that sometimes people have a misconception about this, is that surgical care is actually relatively inexpensive relative to the benefits that it gives somebody. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about super advanced stuff, like I'm not talking about like pancreatic surgery treatment or something like that, or pancreatic cancer treatment, something like that. But when you're talking about trauma care and you're talking about basic general surgery, basic orthopedic surgery, even basic neurosurgery, these things are relatively easy to achieve if you with just a small, with just a normal expected level of sophistication and wealth in the society. Like I can do surgery in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is one of the poorest places in the world. That's not the wealth is not usually the barrier. And like I said, surgical care is actually it has an extremely good cost benefit ratio. Also because usually especially for trauma care, for example, it's in young people. If you stop a young person from dying, their family doesn't lose a breadwinner, or et cetera, et cetera. It has a lot of positive downstream effects. Whereas if you keep grandma alive for another 20 years, that's really beneficial to the family, in material terms at least. but anyway, the ability of the hospitals to actually provide care is obviously just totally dependent on the society around them. And like you said, the whole society has just been ripped to shreds. That infrastructure is just not there anymore. My job as a trauma surgeon is to stop people from bleeding to death, right? If you're shot and I get a hold of you, I can probably do everything that's needed to get you better. If you have a broken arm, if you have a broken leg, maybe you need an orthopedic surgeon as well. If you got shot in the head, that's a different matter. You'll need a neurosurgeon. But if you're shot in the neck, the chest, the abdomen, the groin, or even the legs, I can do almost everything that you need to stay alive. But at Nasser, there were no ground troops in the city. So shootings, we saw them, but they were less common. When we did see them, they were very, very high caliber weapons, like the ones that are mounted on helicopters, for example. They weren't like individual soldiers shooting people for the most part. And so what that meant is I was mostly dealing with explosive injuries, and explosive injuries are very, very different. You need a multidisciplinary team. You need an orthopedic surgeon. You need a neurosurgeon. You need a critical care physician, which I can do that too. But you need a trauma surgeon. So I can stop you as the trauma surgeon. I can stop you from bleeding to death. But who's going to reconstruct your limbs? Who's going to put your spine back together? That kind of stuff is very, very difficult to do if you can't even sterilize equipment. Like you can't start putting rods into somebody if you don't have rods. You can't put those rods in if you can't sterilize them because the autoclave doesn't work because there's no electricity. So that sucked, you know. There was a little girl, one of the last cases I took care of is this 11-year-old girl. Her left arm was shredded and both of her legs were shredded. Her trunk was okay, like her neck, her chest, her abdomen. She wasn't bleeding to death, but she had these massive injuries to her limbs. So I spent about 3 hours debriding the wounds on both of her legs. And then Mark Perlmutter and Morgan McMonagle, they're an orthopedic and vascular surgeon, respectively. They restored blood flow through her left arm, and they repaired the bony damage to her left arm. But because, and again, she didn't bleed to death, but because we don't have a high level of sterility. Again, even that would be available in any third world country. We don't have a high level of sterility. We don't have access to antibiotics that are completely normal to have anywhere else. And the hospital is so overcrowded that this little girl has to share a bed with 2 other people. 3 out of her 4 limbs were amputated eventually. So you know what I mean? Like, I stopped her from dying. Okay, good for me. But what does it mean to be an 11-year-old girl in Gaza with 1 right arm and no other limbs? It's not, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, do you think, maybe without getting into specific, we could probably, I was thinking about how to phrase the question. I guess instead of getting into specifics of this example, in general, what do people do? So say you save their life, right? You prevent them from bleeding to death. What do they do for that kind of reconstructive surgery? It sounds like they just don't get it. And yeah. So it kind of depends on the specifics, but in general, they just don't get it. So like, say it's a brain injury, right? There was an explosion, you got thrown against a wall and you have a brain injury. Well, either the brain injury will kill you or it won't. You don't have a neurosurgeon available, but the only neurosurgeon is at European Hospital, which is a different place. And off lids, it's shut down anyway. So you don't have a neurosurgeon available. So we put a breathing tube down and we wait. If the brain injury is mild enough and the person is healthy enough, then maybe they'll survive. And if they survive, maybe they'll recover their mental abilities. You know, maybe they won't. If they don't, then when we take the breathing tube out 2, 3, 4 weeks later, they're just going to aspirate their own spit and eventually die of pneumonia. So total wasted effort, all could have been easily dealt with. If they have a spinal cord injury, they're just going to be paralyzed. There's nothing you're going to be able to do about that. If they have shredded limbs like this girl, then you try to save them, but eventually, because you don't have the ability to actually reconstruct them properly, they get septic, they get infected, and they have to be amputated. If it's a pelvis fracture, like say you were thrown into a wall and your pelvis was broken,
only a crazy person would start putting hardware like metal screws and stuff like that into a person's pelvis in Gaza. They're malnourished and there's no way to sterilize anything. So instead, people just lie in bed for 6 to 8 weeks in order to let those bones heal slowly. Well, you can't spend 8 weeks in a hospital in Gaza. I mean, how are you going to eat? How are you going to survive? It doesn't work that way. So a lot of these people just die slowly, unfortunately. It's very disheartening. It's not, and again, I just want to emphasize to people, like, this is not, all of these types of, everything that I needed to do for somebody in Gaza, I could have done in a mid-sized hospital in like any part of Africa. It's not advanced stuff. It's just that it's not in Gaza because the place has been destroyed. It's a symptom of the wider picture.
Yeah. And to what extent is it that the place has been destroyed, or that the place has been kind of under siege, so to speak, and that resources are not allowed to come in? I guess it's a bit of both.
Those are kind of two sides of the same coin, but it's a good point that both of these things are being done. It's not just the physical destruction, but quite literally, Gaza has been under siege not since October of 2023, but since 2007. That's when the air, land, and sea blockade was instituted, and it's been constant ever since. So it's definitely a combination of both. But, on top of that, people should remember that 17 of Gaza's 36 hospitals don't really function. If you look at the WHO bulletins, about half of those are just physically destroyed, and the other half are just so ripped to shreds that they can't even be reconstructed. But when people talk about Gaza, they often, you hear this, that there's 36 hospitals in Gaza. That's not really true. A lot of those hospitals have like 2 beds. Or like there's some like little private institution that doesn't do anything, or they're only maternity hospital, something like that. The major hospitals where somebody can actually get emergency care, be it trauma or emergency medical care, are Shifa, which for all intents and purposes now is just an emergency room. That was about 20% of Gaza's hospital system right there, that one hospital, or that one medical complex. Then Nasser, where I was, European, which is out of commission, Indonesian, which I believe is out of commission right now, Kamal Adwan, which is out of commission, and Ahli Baptist Hospital, which I believe is out of commission, although I might be wrong about that, and then the hospital in Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah. So those like 6 or 7 hospitals, those are the only ones that can actually provide real care. And Aqsa Martyrs Hospital is like a 60-bed hospital. It's very, very small. It's about the size of my house. Like, it's not a big place, it's just not, so it's those 3 things. It's the fact that the healthcare system has been attacked and largely destroyed. It's the blockade, stopping it from being rebuilt or resupplied. And also it's the massive, generation of huge numbers of injured people, especially injured children, that just soak up so much resources.
Yeah. This makes sense. Yeah, I mean, this is a lot. It's really sad to see how basically all these hospitals are getting closed down, and how people are completely lacking medical care. I guess to what extent, when you were there, to what extent were the patients kind of people that were based off of direct incidences? Say they were, like you're talking about people who were shot or who maybe got launched based off of like maybe a bomb or something like that. To what extent were the patients based off of direct things happening, or to what extent were they like the people that need to go to the ER because people need to go to the ER for like for kind of everyday life emergencies?
Just normal medical problems that happen to people, right?
Medical problems.
Yeah, it's actually a good question. I don't know the answer. When the ceasefire was before March 18th of last year, then it was you could see the hospital was functioning more normally. So we would get like maybe 10 or 15 trauma patients every day, but most of the hospital was dealing with medical problems, like emergency medical problems. After March 18th, it was just all trauma that I saw. I'm sure there were still people coming in. Kids are still going to have asthma attacks. Older people are still going to fall down. People are still going to have strokes. They're still going to have heart attacks. But I was just 100% focused on trauma at that point, so I couldn't tell you. But the ER, every time I walked through the ER, it was full of trauma patients and almost nobody else. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. And yeah, I mean, this is something that also happens when you have a significantly high population with a low amount of doctors or low amount of medical facilities. Is that more and more people need to go to the same center, and you have
yeah, exactly. And especially when there's just not there's no freedom of movement in Gaza. So if you get injured and you're able to get to a hospital, you just have to go to that hospital. It's not like they can distribute the patients throughout Gaza is the size of Philadelphia, right? It's not a big place. If a bomb were to go off in Philadelphia, they wouldn't send all of the patients to the closest hospital. That's stupid, right? Like, it might not be a trauma hospital. Even if it is a trauma hospital, you don't want to send 150 people to it right away. The EMS people at the scene would say, okay, these are the sickest people. Let's send them to, the biggest trauma center. These are the next sickest people. Let's send them to the level 2 trauma center. And all these people just have finger injuries. They can just go to the local hospital. That'll be fine. None of that coordination is even possible in Gaza. Ambulances can't move freely. People can't move around, without the risk of being killed. So even that ability is completely gone.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be that I was going to ask you about that. So, like, so anyone in Gaza would go to the hospital you went to, or would only like a certain part of Gaza? So, like in the Philadelphia analogy, that might be like the northern Philadelphia goes. I don't know the Philadelphia region super well.
That's okay, no worries. Like everybody who gets injured in Philadelphia doesn't go to Temple, right? Like, that's not how it works exactly. And or UPenn, like there's several hospitals in several huge hospitals there, because that's people need that kind of care. But no, in Gaza, there were when I was there, let's see. Aqsa Martyrs Hospital was still open. The Shifa emergency room was open. Kamala one was already out. Indonesian might have been open when I was there. But anyway, there were one or two hospitals with maybe 150 or 200 beds everywhere north of Wadi Gaza. So Gaza City and the northern part, that used to be the populated part of the Gaza Strip, where 70% of the population lived. And then south of there, where probably half of the population actually lived, just because it had been displaced down there, was Nasser Medical Complex and Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, which together have like 300 beds about. And then European Hospital was out of commission. So, or at least, when I was there, European was in commission, but it was taken out of commission right after I left. There were other hospitals that people would go to. There are also some field hospitals in Gaza. Like MSF used to have a field hospital. I don't think it does anymore because they've been thrown out of Gaza, or they left Gaza, whatever term you want to use. And the Jordanian military had a field hospital in Gaza. The International Medical Corps used to. I don't know if they still did at that point. I can't remember. The ICRC, the International Committee for the Red Cross, they had a field hospital in Gaza. Now, these field hospitals mostly don't admit patients. Like, they don't have beds. They just they're mostly like trauma stabilization points. So they bandage somebody up, or if they need an operation, they do the operation, but then they usually have to send them somewhere else to be admitted, to recover, et cetera, et cetera. Those were the major ones. Actually, I think the Kuwaiti might have had there might have been a Kuwaiti field hospital as well. Yeah.
Let me ask one more, or two more kind of detailed, more medical side questions real quick. So if someone got injured, so say I got injured and I needed an ambulance, would the roads working such that the ambulance could generally come and pick them up and then get me to the hospital, or was that often a difficulty too?
It depends where you are. In northern Gaza, at that time, no, the roads were just all covered in rubble, except for the routes that the Israelis used to bring tanks and other armored vehicles in and out, which I'm sure the Red Crescent would not want to drive on. In Khan Yunis, there was a lot of rubble blocking up the streets, but most, if this street was blocked, the next one over would be open, that kind of thing, you know. Now, obviously, when an explosive weapon hits a building, it causes new problems of access. There's fires, there's rubble on the road, but for the most part, in Khan Yunis, where I was, ambulances could move. The bigger question actually became, while I was there, will the Red Crescent have enough fuel to actually run its ambulances? Because fuel also hadn't been brought in since March 2nd, and by the time I left on April 1st, that situation continued until late May or early June. And their fuel stocks were at critically low levels. You know, they couldn't send their ambulances out to people wherever they wanted to go. And then on top of that, a lot of the ambulances have just been destroyed, not only since October 7th, but well before that. A lot of ambulance workers have been killed. There was just a big open source investigation of the killing of the 15 ambulance workers and the UN worker and the firefighters in Tel El Sultan back in March. It was March 23rd of last year. Not only have the hospitals been attacked, but even the pre-hospital system, that's what we call ambulance services, the pre-hospital system has also been attacked very directly and very hard. And again, no hospital system and no ambulance system is designed to withstand armed attack. That's not a thing. There's no way to create a situation. There's no way to create a hospital system like that. And that's why hospitals and ambulances and other such things are supposed to be exempt from attack under international law.
Right. I even thought military hospital systems are usually not fully designed for armed attack.
That's exactly why. Not only, and that's an important point. Not only are civilian hospitals exempt from military attack, except under the most extreme circumstances. Military hospitals themselves are also are not subject to direct attacks. The international law is very clear about this in the Fourth Geneva Conventions. Or I should say the 1949 Geneva Conventions, the fourth one. I forget which article it is now, honestly, but it very clearly lays out when a military force can and can't attack a hospital. So it says that a hospital can only be attacked when it's used to commit what are called acts harmful to the enemy. And it specifically says that several things do not count as acts harmful to the enemy. Number one is the simple presence of armed people. That's not acts harmful to the enemy. Number two is the presence of injured or wounded soldiers in that hospital. Not acts harmful to the enemy. Even the presence of those, so even if those soldiers bring their arms with them, as long as they're given out to a reasonable authority, as soon as can be done, that's not acts harmful to the enemy. The only thing that's actually acts harmful to the enemy are to actually carry out attacks from the hospital, which is not something that anybody's doing. And, and nothing that's going on. But that applies to civilian and military hospitals. You know what I mean? Like it's not. It doesn't matter that like a Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba in Israel is almost entirely run by the IDF at this point. The Israeli army. There are very few non-uniformed people there. There's plenty of people who are armed all over the place. There are armed helicopters landing and taking off, et cetera, et cetera. But nobody thinks that means the hospital is a legitimate target of attack. That's just not a thing at all.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And I have one other more medically focused question, and then I wanted to broaden the conversation. But on the medical side, so maybe you mostly work because you mostly worked in trauma. Maybe you didn't fully see this, but what was your impression as to the medical needs of the people? So obviously someone's shot or something, but you were kind of hinting at some of this when you were talking about many people didn't have enough food, but what did from a medical side, like what kind of issues seem to kind of come up? Is like malnutrition, like other things, or kind of like how was the community doing? Because it seemed like they're also just generally deprived of a lot of resources for well-being.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. One of the things that, we all exist in our relatively advanced societies where we're all, we're well off. We walk around. You kind of forget that the purpose of a society is largely to keep children under 5 alive. That's like a lot of what we do. The reason we have a sewage system, the reason we live indoors, the reason we, have clean food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason we have obstetric and pediatric care is to keep small children alive so that they can actually develop over those first 5 years and become robust enough to really survive the more difficult challenges in life. When you destroy an entire society, you take all of that away. Destroying a sewage system, which is what the U.S. and Israel have done in Gaza, the only thing that will lead to is an increase in death amongst children under 5. Starving the population, the only thing that will lead to what? That'll kill a lot of people, but it'll especially kill children under 5. Taking away basic medicines, basic vaccines, and again, nothing that's fancy. Just the regular old stuff that anybody, can get anywhere. That's going to kill kids under the age of 5. And that's what's happened. I mean this quite literally. Gaza is half children, right? So there's kids under 5 all over the damn place. You can't avoid it. There's this like running around, playing, enjoying themselves as much as they can. And I literally never once saw a kid that didn't have a cough and diarrhea. And I don't mean like, oh, they have a little bit of diarrhea. How inconvenient for me. No, they like full on, like I have to pop a squat and just poop on the side of the road right now. That kind of diarrhea. And when a kid has this, it's not, anybody who's had children, I don't, but anybody who's had children knows that, kids get diarrhea sometimes. Okay, that's not the end of the world. But when a child has diarrhea for 2 years straight, that's a very, very different matter. That's not, they're not going to grow. If they manage to survive, they're not going to grow to their normal potential. Their brain isn't going to develop normally. They're going to be shorter, less physically capable, more prone to chronic diseases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly enough, most of the best information about this comes from the Nazis' treatment of the Jews in World War II. It's very well understood how this kind of thing affects people. When you concentrate a population, you take away because remember, the population of Gaza was about 2.2 million people, all north to south, 2.2 million. It's probably significantly less now, but at one point, the Israelis, with their U.S. backing, had concentrated 1.5 million people into an area that is smaller than LA International Airport. They were living on a beach. There was no water pipes. There were 120 toilets available to them for 1.5 million people. What is that going to do? It's just going to expose children under 5 to disease, And it's not like an abstract thing. It's just obvious. Like anybody with half a brain could figure this out. You don't have to be a doctor to figure that out. They're living on the sea. They're literally living on the beach. There's no way for them to survive. They're being starved. They're still periodically being blown up. And this whole situation, you can just imagine what happens. So kids in Gaza are having horrendous infectious issues. Skin conditions are a major problem. And again, a kid has a rash. We've all experienced a child that had a rash. It wasn't the end of the world. But again, when a kid has cascading, continuous skin infections covering half their body for years continuously, that's draining them. That is, their immune system is constantly fighting that. This is not how children develop in a normal and healthy way. And it just saps their energy. They can't grow. Their immune system can't develop. And eventually they get a small cut somewhere. Kids run around and play, right? They don't know any better. They get bitten by something. They cut their foot on anything. And that eventually can even kill them because they're so weakened already. They get a bad piece of bread that's, it's got a virus on it. And that's just the last straw, So these are major problems right now. I don't know. I can't give statistics right now, but I think it's very obvious that that pneumonia and diarrhea are the 2 leading causes of death for children in Gaza right now, which is just outrageous. I mean, that's situation that nobody else would tolerate. That is a situation of extreme depravity. And that is not in any way natural or necessary in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, this makes sense.
There's actually more to it than that too. The massive, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but the huge level of environmental destruction. The Israelis have dropped. I don't remember the exact numbers now, but the Israelis have dropped tens of thousands of explosive weapons on Gaza in the past 2 years. It's a lunatic level of bombing. Like, no one has ever seen anything like this done anywhere else. The level of destruction in Gaza actually massive, like is way beyond even the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is crazy. Like, it's just completely off the charts. And that level of destruction of buildings, and the aerosolization of sewage, of human remains, of the explosives themselves, which are made out of God knows what, of metal that's being vaporized and thrown into the air, and then kicking that same stuff up over and over and over and over again with more bombings. And then Gaza is also a very windy place, so all this, because it's a coastal territory, so all of this stuff is constantly being, the wind blowing into all these piles of all sorts of chemical debris, and it's constantly being brought up as a plume. So what, right now there's at least two American, actually one is an Israeli American, physicians, pulmonary critical care physicians, who are working on, they're trying to categorize this in Gaza and what effect is this actually having on people. But from our own experience with the 9/11 attacks, the 9/11 attacks were a big thing, but they were a moment, right? They were a moment in time. They took a morning. And that moment in time, even just that level of destruction, 2 large towers being destroyed in the middle of the biggest city in the United States, just that level of destruction had a measurable impact on the pulmonary health of New Yorkers. Not just the people that worked at Ground Zero, like literally all New Yorkers. And what has been done to Gaza is, I couldn't even quantify it in terms of magnitude. Like, you're talking about hundreds or thousands of times difference in a place that is actually smaller than New York City and is half children. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the health effects are outrageous, and we have no idea what they're even going to be. Right now, we can see the immediate ones: the cough, the diarrhea, the skin infections, the miscarriages, the inability of mothers to breastfeed, because they're so stressed and dehydrated and malnourished. We could go on and on, but the effects to come, if anybody's still in Gaza in a few years, they're anyone's guess, but they're universally bad.
Yeah, this is really sad. It seems like all this is like a system. It's like the different things, like in a functioning society, these different things kind of might positively reinforce each other and promote health. But it's like each of the faculties of the system is being destroyed, and that's cyclically destroying the other aspects of the system and hurting people's health.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what it is. If anybody wants to read a good book, The Gaza Strip: The Political Economy of De-Development by Sara is a really, really worthwhile book. The last edition came out in 2016, so it's not new. Roy goes through how the subtitle of the book is The Political Economy of De-Development. And what de-development's referring to is that after when Israel took control of the Palestinian territory in 1967, when the occupation began, the Israelis very systematically mapped out the Palestinian economy and figured out how to destroy it. Not through bombing and bulldozing, but through administrative procedures. Block this, block that, whatever it might be. Largely through administrative procedures. There was a lot of violence too, obviously, but administration was the main way it was done. And the same, and this was most extreme in Gaza. It was done in the West Bank too, and it's still being done, but it was most extreme in Gaza. That's where she studied it. But the same thing has been done over the past, 2.5 years now, but almost exclusively through violence, and directed not just at Gaza's economy, but at literally its entire society. And like I said, a society is it's mostly something that keeps children alive. You take that away and children will die.
Yeah, this makes sense. With that actually relates to the thing I wanted to ask you next, which was I wanted to ask about what I wanted to zoom out a little bit. I'll start one rung of zooming out and ask about like what Israel has been doing in terms of in terms of preventing access and things like this for medical care and other types of humanitarian aid. The thing, there was a specific detail that you said before that I wanted to bring back up because it connects to this, which was that you were talking about how recently Israel is blocking access, and at about the same time last year, I think like literally a year to the day ago.
Almost to the day, yeah.
They did something similar, and that day being March 1st, I guess, for anyone who's listening to this at a different time. But this was something I was thinking when you said this. But later you were like, it's related to being Ramadan, and I couldn't remember exactly when Ramadan was last year because it doesn't always match the
change it because it's a lunar calendar. Yeah,
it's a different calendar. But yeah, like maybe if you wanted to talk about that too, like what have they been doing in terms? It seems like sometimes they grant access, they deny access. It seems like they're specifically being harsher in Ramadan, or what? Yeah, what's been going on?
I don't know if they're specifically being harsher in Ramadan. It's possible. There is, the Israeli government used to be run, I guess until like even for most of the 90s, the Israeli government was run by the Labor Party. And the Labor Party has all sorts of problems with racism and other such things, towards the Palestinians. It was still very much in favor of keep destroying them and getting rid of them. But they also had more of a rational view of the world, where they understood that, there's no reason to deliberately antagonize everybody all the time. Whereas now, like right now, actually, like we keep mentioning, it's Ramadan. Now I'm not Muslim. I don't practice Islam, and so I don't really know what Ramadan celebrations are. I didn't until I spent time in the Palestinian territory. But right now in Jerusalem, which, remember, is a holy city, not just for Judaism, but also for Christianity and for Islam, the Israelis have actually basically forbidden any celebration of Ramadan. There's no, the typical Ramadan decorations are not being allowed up. And this is before, right now Israel and Iran are attacking each other, so you might say it's for that, but this was before any of that happened. There's a tradition, I forget the name of it, but there's a person that goes around and wakes people up, because people will have a very, very big meal usually when the sun goes down. That's iftar. And then they'll hang out for a little while, and around like 10 o'clock, people will take a nap. And then, this guy goes around with like a loudspeaker and wakes people up at 2 so that they can start preparing a meal for 4 a.m. before the sun comes up again. They've forbidden that guy from going around and just yelling in Muslim neighborhoods to wake up, It's completely ridiculous. So there is that level of pettiness now in in Israeli rule over the territories that, we're just going to stick it to you. Your Ramadan can go to hell. But I don't have any evidence that that's actually the reason that Gaza's been blocked off in Ramadan both times. I think they just saw the opportunity and went for it. But regardless of that, the way that we should be really clear about something. I'm an American. I'm assuming you are too. I shouldn't just assume, I suppose, but you are, yeah. So we should stop saying that the Israelis are doing anything, because in fact, at this point, I've always said this was a U.S.-Israeli attack on Gaza, but at this point, it is literally a U.S.-Israeli attack on Gaza and a U.S.-Israeli siege on Gaza. Part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Palestinian armed groups, what everyone calls a ceasefire agreement, was was that the U.S. Would take over aid entry into Gaza, the entry of aid. And the U.S. has set up a thing called the CMCC. It's the Civilian Military Coordination Center. It's just east of Gaza in Kiryat Gat. It's there. It's full of uniformed American security personnel, from the Army, from other branches of the armed forces. Their job is to get stuff into Gaza, and they're not doing any of it. And the reason was explained very clearly by the New York Times. It was hardly a secret. It's not a secret to anybody who's paying any attention. The New York Times interviewed the Army folks that were sent there as logistics experts, because the U.S. Army has the best logistics people in the world. If you want to, you want to move a whole armada or something to Iran, you have to know how to do that, and that requires a lot of moving parts. So the logistics people went there, and then they just left. They said, there's no reason for us to be here. There's no logistical problem. The place we need to go to is right over there, and all the stuff that needs to go there is right over there. And the Israelis are just telling us we can't do it. That's it. There's no logistical problem at all. It's just a political problem. So the U.S. and Israel are now cooperating, in keeping Gaza under siege. And it's just, it's just an absolutely shocking thing. The way they do this is just simple. They just don't allow anything to go in. Everybody, it's not, the rule of law doesn't really apply to powerful people. Everything we're doing is illegal. That everybody, even under Israeli law, it's totally illegal. It's completely ridiculous. But it just doesn't matter. The powerful can do whatever they want. The UN is not going to start, blowing holes in Israel's defensive line to get aid into Gaza. It's completely ridiculous. They don't have to
veto that.
Well, yeah, the U.S. wouldn't allow it, and furthermore, it's just insane. I mean, nobody wants to start a nuclear war. It's just the people should understand. There is no Gaza is a place, like I said, it's the size of Philadelphia. On two sides, it is surrounded by one of the wealthiest countries in the world. On the other side, is the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and then on the other side is the Mediterranean Sea. It's not an inaccessible place, right? You can, like the Tel Aviv, the most important city in Israel. I think it's the biggest city as well. Tel Aviv is so close to Gaza that people could feel the bombing of Gaza in Tel Aviv. So it's not far. Like, this is not a big place. All of Israel, I think, is the size of Delaware or something. It's very, very small. Like, think about how hard is it to drive things across Delaware? It's not. Israel's a first world country. It has all sorts of beautiful roads. I've seen them. I've driven on them. It's not hard to move things around this place. And furthermore, everything that the people of Gaza need to survive, at least to survive in some reasonable fashion, is right outside of Gaza. It's a few miles away sitting in Israel. It's a few more miles away sitting in Jordan, but that's even still only 60 or 70 miles away. It's all being denied on purpose. It's not, like I said, just like those logistics people that the Times talked to said, it's not a logistical problem. It's a political one. As soon as the political decision is made to not destroy these people, the aid will flow in just fine.
I mean, yeah, this makes sense. Do you see any change to the politics? If it as a political issue, do you see any kind of willingness on Israel's part to just let things in, or what do you see on that?
Well, if the Israelis wanted to do it, they would have already done it. It's not the U.S. is telling them not to. I'm sure, or I would guess at least, that the U.S. would prefer if the Israelis did let stuff in, because it probably causes problems with their, the Saudis are probably telling them people are getting mad that people are starving in Gaza, and it's going to cause problems for the Arab dictatorships in the Gulf in terms of popular unrest and things like that. But no, and if the Israelis are not going to change anything, it's very unfortunate, but Israel is, and I don't say this with any, enjoyment, or any, I don't know, but, Israeli society has largely become genocidal, and it's not it's something that's actually very hard to miss. There's no shortage of polls about this. Maybe a year or 10 months ago, something like that now. I think it was the University of Pennsylvania, but some American institute, went to Israel and they asked, some very, very clear questions. And one of them was, if the Israeli Defense Forces conquer a city, meaning in Gaza, if the Israeli defense forces conquer a city, should they act as the ancient Israelites did in Jericho? And then they specifically included this explanation, meaning kill every single person. And more than 50% of Israelis said yes. Actually, let me clarify that. More than 50% of Jewish Israelis said yes. I presumably Arabs all said no. Who knows, but most likely. This is just one poll I just have because I just remember the phrasing of the question so clearly. This is just one poll, but there's just poll after poll after poll about this. And it's hardly every single person. Like I just mentioned, I was in Israel giving some these unofficial seminars at, or actually maybe it was before we started recording, but I went to Israel when I was denied entry into Gaza. I went to Israel because I was supposed to give some little seminars at Ben Gurion University and Tel Aviv University. So I went there and, some people came to it, and obviously the professors who invited me, who I know, they're friends of mine, they're not genocidal maniacs, but the country and the society has been driven really, really far to the ultra dehumanizing extreme right. And it didn't happen on October 7th. It's been happening since 1977. But it's really gone quite off the rails. And just so everybody understands, that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. Like Germany was the same way in the 1940s. Now, other than when it comes to Gaza, they're actually reasonable people. The Japanese were probably the craziest people in the world in the 1940s, and now they're some of the most welcoming and gentle people in the world. So it's not like countries can't change and societies can't change, but right now that's the situation that we're in. But that's why I try to get people away from talking about Israel, because we can't blame the Israeli. Like if I hand you a gun, watch you shoot somebody, and then I say, would you like more bullets? Or is that enough? If you have enough bullets for now, you're good. We're both murdering that person together. It's not that you pulled the trigger. Fine, you murdered him, but so did I, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to condemn you. That's just total hypocrisy, right? We have the ability to stop everything that is going on in Gaza, and we don't have to bomb anybody. We don't have to kill anybody. All we have to do is just stop sending the means to do these things, So the real question is not the Israelis. The real question is us. Is there any appetite here for dealing with this problem by just stop participating in the crimes? We just don't have to participate. And I think the answer is yes. I mean, unfortunately, the U.S. is not a terribly democratic country, at least in practice. We have plenty of institutions that are run democratically, but they don't actually function in that way. And, just to give you an example on today's Sunday, so not yesterday, but the Saturday before, I went to, I was asked to come speak at the California Democratic Party's, Progressive Caucus, which is still part of the Democratic Party. That's where Bernie Sanders would speak, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, somebody like that. And, I think Ro Khanna spoke. I had to leave, but I think Ro Khanna spoke after me. And, so it's not like some far off, it's not the Green Party or something that's, totally outside of the mainstream. And, I decided to give this talk, but I was like, I'm going to get booed off stage when I say these things. I was only a 5-minute talk. I went up there and I said, there is a simple fact that we all really need to acknowledge. This was in the middle of the talk, so I set it up a little bit, but I said, there's a simple fact that we all need to acknowledge. We can blame the Israelis for committing genocide in Gaza all we want, but the fact of the matter is we committed genocide in Gaza. And I was sure that was when the boos were going to start. I got a standing ovation. I really couldn't believe it. I was very surprised. I was shocked by that. So I really do think that the appetite is there for in the popular consensus. Like how many Americans or just how many humans do you know that are interested in murdering children? Is that something that you know? Do you know? Have you ever met? Did you even think you've ever met anybody that would be in favor of that in the abstract? No, right? None of us have. Normal people are normal. They have normal human values. But our politicians are a different matter, and they're, it's quite unfortunate, but they're just not normal people. And I shouldn't say all of them, but just a lot of them are not normal people. And, so if people want to, and we can see this right now, with this war in Iran, which is who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. It's completely unknown. But we have to get control of our own society and the structures that govern it. Otherwise, these kinds of things are just going to keep happening. And plenty of, Miramar Martinez and Alex Preddy and Renee Good. All these people know, if the two of them were alive, they could tell you, that these kinds of things don't stay abroad for very long, So I think there's a lot of, I do think Americans want to stop this, which is, that there's another, way of gauging it, I guess, which is that if Americans didn't want to stop this, then there'd be no reason to hide it from them. But everything that we're talking about is completely unknown to the vast majority of people because it's not in the news. Even the people that pay attention to this, even my friends, like people who know me personally, and this is all I talk about, it drives them nuts. But even my friends, they who know, like they know I don't exaggerate things. I don't, I try not to speak unless I know what I'm talking about. But even my friends will say, like, Feroze, is it really that bad? Are you sure it's our weapons? Like, they must be getting them from somewhere else. I don't think our politicians are in favor of this. It's just all hidden from them. And it's, but yeah, so I think there is an appetite for acting more decently in the world, but Israel isn't where we should look for it. If we stop empowering the worst elements of Israeli society, which is what we've been doing for the past 40 years, if we stop doing that, then the normal, sane Israelis, who do still exist, there's not as many of them, but they're there, they will reassert themselves in the society. But for now, it's quite a different matter. I don't know if you saw the video, but just maybe yesterday or the day before yesterday, there were two Israeli women in their 50s. So, relatively elderly women. They're not invalids, but they're, women in their 50s who were in they had been called, they're activists who work in the West Bank, and they've been called and told by a Palestinian friend of theirs that somebody had set, I forget if it was a house or a warehouse, so somebody had set something on fire. The settlers had set something on fire, and he wanted to go and retrieve stuff before it all burned, but he was afraid that if he went, they would kill him. So he called them, and these activists came and wanted to help him. And a bunch of settlers, masked, came up and beat two 50-year-old Israeli women into unconsciousness, almost killing both of them. That's not, so like there are Israelis that are trying to help their neighbors. There are Israelis who are being reasonable human beings. There's no, in fact, very decent human beings. But as long as we empower the people with the clubs, we're not helping the Israelis live in a moral place or survive, in my opinion, at least not in the long term.
Yeah, this makes sense. I mean, something that what you said reminded me of was that one of my professors in grad school, she had a saying that she would frequently say, which was, I'm pausing, I'm trying to remember the exact way she phrased it. It was, people are rarely the villains in their own stories.
Yeah.
People and people do bad things, both on like a systematic societal level, but also on an individual level. But people generally, even in those situations, they conceive of what they're doing as something that's either as good or as a necessary evil, even if they still see some bad aspects of it. And we tend to construct these narratives, and what you're saying kind of reminds me of that, because I feel like a decent amount, probably on the societal level, a decent amount is it's narrative formation. It's about forming narratives that justify these types of attacks. I mean, obviously, like I'm not like I don't see like kidnapping individual people as like a good thing, but like that doesn't justify like waylaying a community and just bombing the crap out of them. But like you can, as a narrative justification, I guess.
Yeah, and just to because just think about it, like anybody who says, "Oh, what Hamas did on October 7th was terrible, but it doesn't justify destroying Gaza," that's true. You can go back a step as well and say what Hamas, or you can go back a step and say, what the Israelis were doing to Gaza before October 7th was terrible, but it doesn't justify October 7th. There's no you can go back until the beginning of time if you want to. That's not the point. Yeah, but no, you're exactly correct. Like the human capacity for self-deception, especially in a moral sense, is just limitless. I mean, it's kind of amazing what people can convince themselves of is right. Again, I mean, just imagine it's teenagers that jump out of this ATV and they beat people nearly to death that look like their mom. That's pretty hard to justify. But you know, it's religious nutcases have done a lot of things that religion isn't all bad. Like at least not in my opinion. I'm not a religious person, but I've seen plenty of people who do amazing things because of their religious convictions. But religion can also be used to justify incredible brutality and inhumanity. And in the case of Israel, unfortunately, that's what it's being used for. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's not like Jews in Europe were massacring people. You know, they were hardly a violent group of people. It's not inherent to Judaism. It's not, that's hardly the case.
Right. And that was, yeah, the question I wanted to ask you was like, in your experience, I guess this focuses on, because you said you like had done seminars and done stuff in Israel. This focuses on the side of things in Israel specifically. But in Israel, like, does this call for violence kind of represent the will of the people, in your opinion, or are there people in Israel who are like, no, this is too much, or this is bad? We need to not do this. Like, to what extent is this a like kind of a government led or led by the specific coalition that Netanyahu is now in charge of, and all that, and kind of led? And to what extent is this like, or to what extent is this like? Because in the U.S., there are significant portions of people that are very concerned about Palestine, for example. But yeah. I guess to what extent is this government-led or kind of people-led in your experience?
No, it's both, but it's not. Again, you know, Israeli society is complex, just like any other. You know, if you put 10 million people in one place, you're gonna have a variety of opinions on things. I know plenty of Israelis who are incredibly decent people, who put themselves on the line. Like, I don't know the two women in that video, but I'm sure I know people that they know. And who do the same thing on a regular basis. They could very easily just ignore this stuff like everybody else does, you know? But they don't. And that's, you really have to think that that's impressive, because in Israel, it's a very small society. You know, it's, you know, like I said, it's about the size of Delaware. There's about 10 million people there. And, excuse me. And it's not, the price of dissent is not zero. You know, it's, it can range just, you know, it can just be having trouble at work, but it can be with you getting clubbed to death on the side of a road. And so no, there are plenty of Israelis who are opposed to what's going on for moral reasons, who are saying that this is just all bad. Like all of this is only going to lead to a bad place. It's all immoral. All of this violence is totally unnecessary. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. About half of Israel's Jewish population is non-Zionist. Because they don't even believe that the state of Israel should exist, because they're ultra religious Orthodox Jews. And they believe that the state of Israel is just a heresy. The Jews are supposed to wait for the Messiah to come back, and the Messiah hasn't come back. So recreating the kingdom of Israel is a heresy. All sorts of stuff. You know, the ingathering of the Jews is illegitimate because the Messiah hasn't come back. There's also, I don't pretend to understand the theology, but but that's a very large part of the population. But at the same time, there is this near majority, who knows? But the fact of the matter is, every Israeli coalition just keeps moving further and further and further and further to the right. And we're not talking about like the right as in like I oppose abortion. We're going to the right as in, you know, a discussion that was recently had in on Israeli television, in Israeli newspapers, and this was widespread. It was not an obscure thing that happened once and then went away. There was a debate, and this even went into the Knesset, was a debate about whether or not Israeli soldiers should be permitted to sodomize Palestinians in prisons. Does that sound like it's something that anybody could seriously discuss in the United States or in any other country? Like everybody says Iran is like the craziest place in the world. Does anybody think that anywhere in Iran, anyone would listen to somebody and tell them anything other than that they're a complete maniac if they recommended sodomizing prisoners in prison? It's just totally insane. You can't even imagine. Like again, this is the kind of thing. Like I said, when I tell my friends this, they're like, "That can't possibly be true." It's all on video. It's hardly obscure, but like that's the level of destruction that we're talking about of the psyche of Israelis that has gone. And again, I cannot stress to people enough. None of this happened on October 7th. This destruction of this perversion of the mind of Israelis has been going on for a very, very long time. And it started in 1977. You could say it started earlier, but it really reached this crazy. It started down this lunatic path in 1977, and it's very, very ugly, and it's very hard to believe some of the stuff that you see. Just recently on I forget if it was channel 13 or channel 14, some commentator just kind of spontaneously offered that he really believes the government. This is I forget his name, but he's a respected commentator. He was on television previously. He's going to come on television again. In other words, saying this kind of thing did not get him kicked out of mainstream Israeli society. In fact, it promoted him within it. He went on TV and he said explicitly, "I think we should just starve everyone in Gaza to death. I think we should kill every child. I don't care that they all starve. That's what we should do. That's the easiest way to get rid of them. Just let them starve to death. Just close the border." Yeah, and incidentally, in front of an audience, like he wasn't even by himself. He wasn't drunk in a podcasting on his own or something. He was in a studio in front of an audience. It's that kind of thing is very. It's very hard to hear and just not wonder what's going on. But no, there are plenty, like I said, there are plenty of Israelis trying to reverse that tide. But the only way we can help them is by stopping empowering these elements in Israeli society. Every gun we send to Israel goes to their hands, not the hands of the peaceniks. It doesn't go to, every time we block a Security Council resolution against the settlements, every time we vote against the peaceful resolution of the Palestine question at the UN General Assembly, every time we allow Israel to bomb Iran or bomb wherever the hell else they want to bomb, this is all of this is turning Israel into a Spartan state. Or I shouldn't say that. All of this has turned Israel into a Spartan state. And, when I think of a Jewish society, I think more of it's not literally true, but I think more of Athens than Sparta. And I think most Israelis, had they not been driven down this path, would also feel that way. But that's up to them in the end. In my opinion, what we should do is just stop interfering with their society constantly and let them decide for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. What about the U.S. side? Like, what do you see about happening? Do you see any changes happening in how people in the U.S. are thinking about this? Or do you see people kind of falling into the same, typical paths of being pro-Palestine or pro-Israel? I mean, you do, in my mind, we had some people, even some key Republicans considering labeling what happened in Palestine, or what happened in Gaza, a genocide. Do you see any change on that side, or do you see it in the same mess it's been for a while?
Yeah, I think so popularly that perception has already changed. Actually, just I forget if it's Gallup or somebody else, but every year they ask I don't know why they ask this question. It's idiotic in my opinion, but they ask this question: do you sympathize more with Israelis or Palestinians? And for the first time, those curves have very, very clearly crossed. I think it's 46% of Americans said Palestinians, and maybe 30-something% said Israel. But that's and that's fine. I don't. I find it hard to believe how anybody could sympathize with the Israelis more than the Palestinians. But the political echelon has not come along as quickly, which isn't surprising. Again, when you live in a very, very heavily managed society like this one, where public opinion is very, very aggressively managed, especially elite public opinion. It's not that surprising, it's kind of funny to see the reaction to this in elite circles. Larry Ellison, the head of is it called Skydance? I think it's called Skydance. He's this. He's not a Zionist. People say he's a Zionist all the time. That's not correct at all. He's an ultra chauvinist Jewish supremacist billionaire, and he's an American. And he just loves Israeli violence. I mean, he's just infatuated by it. He just loves it so much. It's really kind of a disgusting thing. The same with people like Bill Ackman and these people. There's this very, very small group. I'm literally probably like 3 or 4 dozen people of just ultra chauvinist, ultra racist, Jewish supremacist billionaires, Americans, who are they're involved in this bizarre effort to buy, like they've bought CBS News and turned it into this total joke of a place. Even with what's his name? Who's the Amazon guy?
Jeff Bezos.
Bezos, yeah, even with Bezos, he's not in that group of people, but he's turned the Washington Post into a whole joke. He just fired their entire Middle East section. It's just the Washington Post is basically not a newspaper anymore. The New York Times has always been in that milieu anyway. They're basically, and USA Today is not an investigative newspaper for the most part. The CNN is about to be bought by Larry Ellison as well. David and Larry Ellison together, I guess. And interestingly enough, they're doing this with some financing from Saudi and Qatar. The world is actually a lot more complicated than we sometimes realize. This whole all of this is just to try and push Americans back to the place that they were in 3 years ago, not understanding what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, and really not understanding that it's with our help, which is the crucial modifier of that sentence. They're just trying to push people back into that, and I don't think it's going to work. The same thing with the social media platforms have all clammed up any discussion of the Palestinians or of Gaza. Just doesn't go around. The algorithm kind of somehow sorts it out and makes sure people don't see it unless they share it directly with each other. The change in public opinion has already happened, and this elite backlash to it, we'll see what effect it has. The politicians, on the other hand, they respond to money. American elections are just bought. There's no serious discussion to be had about that. The American elections are just bought, unfortunately, and so money is going to be the determining factor at all times, in all situations, and that's still true. We do, in theory, we can all vote, and we can, in theory, all vote for whoever we want. But the means of communication, the means of electioneering, the means of everything is still controlled by elites in the United States. So, whether or not the rest of half the Democratic Party has at least switched over to neutrality, not really a pro-Palestinian stance, just not an encouraging Israel to destroy everybody's stance. And, the other half could, but again, I have to be honest, I'm not hopeful about it. I mean, I try to do everything I can to encourage that transition, but I cannot say that I'm hopeful that it's actually going to work. Everybody still has to try, because hopefully it will, but, I can't say I'm hopeful.
I mean, this makes sense. I guess I'm also not particularly optimistic. Well, with the U.S., I'm not particularly optimistic about the conversation at all, because it seems like it just, like you said, there's a lot of powers that be that control the media. There's a lot of there's just a lot of like synthesizing but like this affects U.S. politics, and like you said, the U.S. is basically funding Israel to do this stuff. What, like, do you see on the international level? Do you see any hope for being kind of pushed to a better state? Like, this might Israel might be pushed kicking and screaming, and maybe even the U.S. to a lesser extent might even be so, but like, do you see any of the peace talks that I mean, at the time that we're recording, Trump a couple months ago had some kind of peace deal that, and I think it fell through. Maybe I'll see. I can't remember. But like, and then you have that like council that was formed. This is all specific to what Trump was doing, like specifically. But that council of different leaders, many of which were in the Middle East, where they were, I think the plan was to try to talk about stuff in Palestine, but like, maybe that stuff, Trump aside, do you see like anything else as having hope to like help this situation, or what do you think?
It's impossible to know. I mean, I'll say it this way. The peaceful way that could happen is if Americans get control of their own government and actually start making decisions for ourselves instead of letting the elites do it for us. The less peaceful way, and, looking at history, that's more likely what's going to happen, is that eventually the U.S. military destroys itself somewhere. Who knows if it'll be Iran or China or God knows what. But at some point, whether it's when the Palestinians still exist or not, who knows? But at some point, the U.S. will not be as powerful as it is, and it won't be able to maintain its empire and give Israel the means it needs to keep the Middle East down by force. So at that point, the Israelis will have to make a choice because they won't have the ability to do it themselves. But I honestly think that's why the Israelis have been so ultra aggressive in the Trump era, is the second Trump era, you could say, is I think they just know that this is probably their last chance to have this enormous, incredibly powerful state, meaning the U.S., backing them, arming them almost unconditionally, and allowing them to do absolutely whatever they want. As far as the Board of Peace goes, that's just a joke. I mean, it's a completely, I saw somebody point out the other day that it took the Board of Peace exactly 1 week to start a war. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's talking about the Board of Peace is, I feel like I'll lose my humanity just by doing that.
Yeah. What you're saying about, I mean, your point about the U.S. power, maybe either the people take control or exhaust themselves. I mean, that there's a lot of historical precedent to that. I guess a lot of superpowers, they go by the way of they overextend and or do like a really dumb invasion that just kind of destroys their military. Like I'm thinking about the USSR in Afghanistan. We could also talk about the U.S. in Afghanistan, but maybe that will be a chunk of it. But like there's all sorts of other historical examples of that. But like with what you're saying with Israel, I mean, I could see Israel basically trying to position itself now, saying, "Oh, we have the backing of the U.S. Maybe that won't happen in the future." So we're going to make our position as, we're going to push as far as we can so we can get as much as possible so that if later there's a bit of a reckoning that they have more of the pieces on the board for negotiations later. Or like, is that what you're kind of hinting at? Or am I making... Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, it's not necessarily, I don't know if it's for negotiations later or if they're just hoping to have gotten rid of all the Palestinians at that point. But, I think I can't prove it. I don't have some special insight into how Israeli leaders think, especially not these ones. But my suspicion is that the U.S. Is trying to destroy Iran as a state. So that'll basically be the last significant confrontation state that just doesn't exist anymore. Right now Syria doesn't exist as a state in any sense. It's half of its territory is taken over by Israel, and its military has been completely destroyed. Most of the factions are just busy killing each other. And if they can do the same thing to Iran, then Israel can actually manage the Middle East for the rest of, maybe for 50 years. just through violence, just by bombing Iran randomly, no, not randomly, but bombing or anybody in Iran that they don't like. It's, can kill anybody in Jordan or Egypt that they don't like. They can keep the Arabs under control. And that's good for the U.S. The U.S. Benefits from that situation a lot. It lets the Saudi and the other Gulf Cooperation Council countries stay in power, stay U.S. friendly, and that allows the U.S. to pivot to Asia, which it's been trying to do for the term in the strategic literature, the pivot to Asia. The U.S. is desperate to try and fight a war with China. It's completely insane. It'll destroy the entire world if it actually happens, but that's the U.S. plan. But it hasn't been able to do that because it can't get out of the Middle East and it can't get out of Ukraine. It's these are long-term projects. They've been going on under, they go back, probably as far as the first Bush administration, from the George H.W. Bush administration. And they're not secret. They're discussed in foreign affairs and other, public journals. But yeah, no, that's the plan is to just, this is something people should maybe appreciate. As far as anybody can tell, actually the Jordanian, I think it was the foreign minister, he just kind of lost his mind about a year ago at the UN, talking about this. But the Israeli plan is quite literally and quite explicitly to rule the Middle East by force and only force forever. Is that something anybody wants? Can something good possibly come of that? If I remember, the foreign minister was at the UN, and I think it was the foreign minister, but somebody from the Jordanian government was there, and he said, some reporter was asking a question, and finally he got sick of it, and he pushed his aide aside, and he said, "Get out of the way." And he said, "Look, whatever your question is, just go ask the Israelis, what is their plan? Right now, all they're doing is going here and killing this, and going there and killing that. What is their plan? They just kill and kill and kill and kill, and they don't have a plan. Why are they killing? Who are they killing? For what reason? They're just killing for the sake of killing, as far as we can tell." So, that's the level of desperation and frustration that people in the region have with this. They don't, Israel's gone crazy. I mean, you can see it. It's not hard to see if you just, step back and don't have preconceptions about it. But yeah, and I don't know, honestly, if the Israelis specifically think that far ahead. I think they do. Actually, it's kind of funny. As soon as a war with Iran started, as soon as the U.S. starts a war with Iran, I should say, Netanyahu goes onto a roof in Tel Aviv and tweets out a video where he says, and I'm not exaggerating. Please look this up. He tweets out a video where he says, "I've been trying to convince the United States to destroy Iran for 40 years, and finally I've done it." I mean, what is this? Why are we having 40-year plots to destroy countries? This is insane. Like, this is not how anything should happen. As to what the Israelis are hoping to get out of it, I think they're hoping to be the kings of the region and just, to rule it by force, like they say. And they're not, Hebrew is not really a secret language anymore. Google Translate does just fine with it, and anybody can listen and read what they say. Like, I read the Israeli press in Hebrew every day, just translated in English. And it's very straightforward. It's very open. There's not much is hidden. And the Americans know exactly who they're talking to. And furthermore, just to be clear, these are plans that are co-made with the United States. The Israelis are hoping to be the American gendarme in the Middle East. They're not hoping to rule it for their own sake. Because they know that it's totally impossible. They don't have there's no way that 10 million Israelis can control 300 million Arabs. It's just absurd. No matter how much tech they have. But they can keep smashing the pieces over and over and over again until the end of time, or at least they think they can if they have the backing of the United States.
Yeah. I mean, this makes sense. I think that you have several different angles here. I mean, because you have the stuff going on specifically in Gaza or in Palestine in general, but you could also view it as a bit of a chessboard, particularly between Israel and Iran. Like this, kind of complex geopolitical game that they've been playing for decades, for the last 40 years. And I mean, with that, Iran also has also spoken about wanting to get rid of Israel, and they've been kind of at each other for a while. But it seems like right now Israel is being very ascendant. Like they've won a lot of the key parts of that broader chessboard. Which, from that perspective, Palestine is only one piece, and you have like Syria and Hezbollah and all these other different pieces in those conversations. And I part of me wonders, like, it's hard to predict the future with stuff like this, with kind of international diplomacy, because this stuff can be a bit like, it can almost be a bit systems oriented. Like a country rises, but then there's almost like counter forces, and then it kind of equalizes or stuff like this. But like you said, like, like you asked who benefits from this. But like, in addition to Israel maybe benefiting, you talked about how the U.S. at least seems to benefit. It seems like their incentive is to let Israel become a power so they can focus on other places. This is a key part of what you're saying. But like, another place that probably does benefit would be Saudi Arabia. And right now it seems like because they also have had their tension with Iran and their own chessboards in Middle East diplomacy there. But like, it seems like they've benefited from Israel doing this. And I wonder, I mean, I don't know if like suddenly if Israel rises too much or something, that like Saudi Arabia would stop benefiting and they would start becoming like a counterweight or something like this. But like, in diplomacy, these kind of things happen. In geopolitics, I mean, like, there can be kind of pushes back. But like, it does seem right now like this is it's not only a very like aggressive Israel government right now, but like, they're largely being successful. And like I don't know how all this will play out.
No, me neither. I would just, the only thing I would add to that is that I think it's a mistake to think of the Arab states that exist as entities that are separate from the U.S. or Israel. The U.S. and Israel are, when we talk about, when we're saying the U.S. and Israel, we don't mean like you and me for the U.S., right? We're talking about the elite and the ruling class.
Yeah,
these people are very
specifically thinking about the government and the foreign.
The government, yeah, exactly. The people that run the state structures. These people, the ruling elite, the Epstein class, the government, whatever you're going to call them, the U.S. is managing an international system, and it's not. How do you say this properly? There is no real distinction between, I mean, there's some, I suppose, but there's very little meaningful distinction between American and Israeli elites. They're very tightly integrated. The corporate systems of the two countries are very tightly integrated. The military systems are very tightly integrated. The U.S. Is heavily involved in Israel's development and its energy infrastructure, all sorts of stuff. And the U.S. has been using Israel as a way of getting around all sorts of, solving all sorts of problems for it in the international system for decades. It's hardly new. But the Arab dictatorships specifically, like the oil, especially forget Jordan and Egypt, they just happen to be places that exist. But the ones that are actually important, that matter, are Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, the Emirates, etc. These are the oil rich Arab dictatorships, and the ruling elites of these places, the ruling monarchs, are actually more closely, no, I shouldn't say more, are just as closely aligned with the United States as Israel is. They were all put in power by the British, and the British, between World War I and World War II, and the British were very clear about what they were doing. They were creating what they called a constitutional facade behind which we will rule. This is some sort of secret. Nobody thinks the Arab world is a democratic place. Like Saudi Arabia is a monarchy, Kuwait is a monarchy, the Qatar, these places are not ruled in any kind of democratic fashion. And if you go back and you look at the past, 15, 20 years, basically ever since the U.S. invasion of Iraq, so I guess the past 20, 25 years, the the Saudis and the Qataris, the Bahrainis, all of these people have been very, very, they've been extremely hostile towards Iran. And and that it's not because they have some natural antipathy towards Iran, like Persians and Arabs don't just hate each other like by default. That's not really a thing. There's plenty of Arabs that live in Iran that get along just fine. But but there is these little Arab, these constitutional facades, or these Arab facades behind which we will rule are still there. The people of these countries don't have any say over what goes on there. And, that's actually one of the major reasons that the U.S. needs Israel to continue controlling the region by force. Like Saudi is a good example. The ruling elite of Saudi Arabia, it had just barely has control over the country. They're hated throughout the country. The only way they can actually survive is by having this pact with the most extreme lunatic Islamists in the society, who export jihadist nonsense and insanity all over the world, which we also pay for in a lot of respects. Just completely crazy. Look at Syria right now. Literally the guy who took over Syria is an ISIS leader. He's not, the man's crazy. This is not this isn't like some hidden secret. Well, so what happened? Well, he's invited to the U.S. and brought on a red carpet, has a nice sit-down interview with General Petraeus, lets Israel, tells the international community that Syria renounces the Golan Heights and Israel can have it even though it's been illegally occupied since 1967. It says that Israel, he orders his forces not to engage with the Israeli forces that have been slowly depopulating the southern part of Syria and driving refugees towards Damascus. It's like the whole thing is completely nuts. But these people are all actually working together. They have little differences of opinion here and there. Maybe one's going to stab the other one in the back at some point. But they're all essentially working together under the Mafia Don, which is us. And, the Mafia Don is managing his own little mafia families and trying to make sure that the chaos stays contained and whatever else. But that's the system that we have. It's very, so yes, I don't, I have to be honest, I don't agree with you that Iran, has been an aggressive country at all, and has really anything to do with this. Iran has like you mentioned that Iran wants to destroy Israel. That's totally false. The Ayatollah is famous, has been famously quoted in the West. And so was, a former president named Ahmadinejad, who apparently was just killed yesterday. They've both been widely quoted as saying that,
real quick, I didn't know that Ahmadinejad has been killed yesterday.
Apparently, who actually knows what's going on there? We have no idea, but that's what the U.S. and Israel are saying. Yeah, unfortunately we can't know much about what's going on in Iran. But they've both been quoted as saying, Israel should be wiped off the map. That's a complete mistranslation of what they said, apparently. One Cole wrote about this in real time. What's his website's called, oh gosh, I can't remember now. Just Juan Cole. He's fluent in Persian. He's an American professor, but he's fluent in Persian. And he pointed out that actually that they're not. That's not what they said at all. What they said is that this it's a reference to poetry apparently, but the phrase was something like get in the passage of time, the Zionist regime will disappear from the world. Well, okay, half of Israel's population, like we were just talking about, how half of Israel's population is anti-Zionist Jews. So they agree with Ahmadinejad in that sense. That's not a statement of violent intent. If I say apartheid South Africa should wither away and become something else, I'm not threatening South Africa. I'm saying it should be some sort of decent state. Like that, those are the point is, at any time anybody has found that anybody they claim that Iran is threatening Israel, it just always turns out to be nonsense. Now, however, that will probably change. I would strongly suspect that that'll change, and there's a reason. The single person who was stopping Iran from developing nuclear weapons, because apparently the whole Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps wanted to develop nuclear weapons, and right now you can see exactly why. It's not to blow up Israel. If Iran even started arming a nuclear weapon, it would be obliterated instantly. But it's obviously a deterrent from attack. The one person who was stopping that was the Ayatollah that we just killed. He had issued a fatwa saying that nuclear weapons are simply illegal under Islamic law. They just cannot be used to do anything other than slaughter civilians, so they can't be built. Well, he's dead. Now someone else is going to come along and make another fatwa, and that's how it works. It's even from their own, even just their own narrow perspective or lens or set of priorities. What the U.S. and Israel are doing in Iran right now is just insane. I mean, it's completely nuts. It's very hard to understand as anything other than, Trump and Witkoff and Kushner having no clue what. I don't think these people know what day of the week it is. It's completely crazy. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Like, actually, the Omani foreign minister apparently had come to the U.S. specifically to the reason he could go on the news recently and say some of the things he said was because he had flown to the U.S. because he didn't think they actually understood any of the negotiations that were going on. So he wanted to come and explain it to them. Like, this is what a nuclear fuel cycle is. This is the difference between nuclear weapons and nuclear power. This is like, apparently they just don't understand any of this. It's just kind of amazing. And then on top of that, the U.S. has now twice bombed Iran under the pretext of negotiating with them. So we've convinced the Iranians that we're perfidious. We can't be trusted. And they'd be correct in that assessment. They'd be correct that the Israelis are just dedicated to destroying them. Netanyahu, like I said, just tweeted it out from a Tel Aviv roof just now. There's no that's a good example. 40 years ago, what was Iran threatening Israel 40 years ago? Of course not. They didn't have a single missile to their name. They didn't have the nuclear power program that the Shah had been investing in was in shambles. 2 million Iranians were getting killed. 250,000 of them were being gassed by Iraqis that we were giving chemical weapons to. It's laughable. The U.S. and Israel have been trying to destroy Iran ever since the first moments of the revolution in 1979. And, I'm not in favor of clerical rule. Like, I'm a secular guy. I don't want to go live in, under the Ayatollah. But that's a very different question from whether or not we should just, like you said, no matter what happened on October 7th, it doesn't justify Israel bombing the hell out of Gaza and destroying the whole place. No matter what the clerics are doing, it doesn't justify, one of the first things we did was kill 150 small girls in a school bombing. Do you know how many kids were killed in the October 7th attacks? 39.
My head, no. Oh, sorry. You said 39?
Yeah, 39. So in one attack, or it was attack on two different places, to be fair, in two missile attacks, the U.S. and Israel killed 5 times as many children, all of them small girls, at school, as were killed on the October 7th attacks. Is that something that anybody can imagine the Iranians would just say, oh, that's fine. We'll forgive that. Is that what we said after 9/11? Did we say, just let Al-Qaeda do whatever they want? That's not how people work. These people are being threatened with destruction, with the complete destruction, not of their government and not of their state, but of their society. And it's perfectly obvious to them. I strongly suspect that the reason the Israelis assassinated Khamenei, and the reason they blew up that girls' school, you have to remember, the U.S. and Israeli missiles are not like the Iranian missiles. They have meter-to-meter precision. They're extremely precise, and they know exactly what's going on. They hit every target that they hit almost always on purpose. Could there be an exception here or there? Sure, but it's unlikely. The Israelis probably did that in order to make sure that Iranians would demand revenge. That they're not going to give up. In other words, they probably won't start firing. Trump is out saying that, now the Iranians are all calling me by the thousands and saying they want to surrender. It's like, no, first of all, they're definitely not. But secondly, the attack was designed to make sure that it instilled hostility, because you kill soldiers. Okay, you've killed soldiers. I mean, it's not good. I don't want people dying, but everybody understands that soldiers die in war. That's what war is. Nobody understands blowing up a girl's school with a precision-guided missile. That's not something. All of this is designed to make sure Iranians know that Israel will never relent until they're destroyed. Well, okay, now it's an existential fight. And now you're going to bring nuclear weapons into this? It's also important to remember the Iranians, because of Trump's utter stupidity in his first term, the Iranians can act. It doesn't seem that they're building a nuclear weapon right now. If they had one, they obviously would have detonated it so everybody could see it. But but now they will. And because they have this huge stockpile of highly enriched uranium, because Trump walked away from the JCPOA and tore it up, now it's actually very easy for them to develop a nuclear weapon. They won't actually take very long. The only person, like I mentioned, the only thing that was stopping them was the Ayatollah, and Israel decided to blow into bits.
Yeah, this makes sense. I will say real quickly, what you're saying about Iran not necessarily having the intention of destroying Israel makes sense. I'll rescind that statement of mine.
But it's common knowledge, actually. Like if you ask anybody on the street, they'll totally tell you exactly what you said. This is one of the big problems. You have to actually have like a level of specialist knowledge. And I'm not like an academic, studying these things, but I spend a pathological amount of my time reading about them. And, so I happen to know these things, but and furthermore, gosh, when was Ahmadinejad in power? 2009, 10, 11, somewhere around there. I've been reading about this.
Too.
Yeah, somewhere around there, right? But I've been reading about this since I was 18. Like I'm 44 now. It's not. There's such an incredible level of propaganda and nonsense. And just to be clear, it's not like Iran is some country bathed in flowers where only good humans live and they go. No, that's not what we're talking about at all. Like I said, Iran does a lot of nasty things the Iranian government does a lot of nasty things to its own population. Like I happen to date a girl who grew up in Iran. And she's a very secular person like me. And she describes her whole childhood was running away from the religious police because she refused to cover her hair. It's not nice. I mean, she should be allowed to live the way she wants to. Anybody should be. But that's, so it's not like it's a nice group of people. That's just silly. But and actually, if you want to talk, I guess it'll go on too long, but they're not a nice group of people, but but this is not the way to make things better. And the simple fact of the matter is they're not nice people, but they weren't threatening to destroy anybody else. The Israelis and the Americans do on a regular, if not daily basis. That's why Iran has a missile program. That's why it has a drone program. Iran is a poor country. It's not, and actually this is so crazy that back in must have been 2005, maybe. We invaded Iraq in 2003, so maybe 2005, maybe 2004, somewhere around there. Israel's leading military historian at the time was a guy named Martin von Krevel. I think he's passed away since then, but he wrote in and he said it in many places, but I remember reading it in this newspaper that used to exist called the International Herald Tribune. He wrote, no one knows if the Iranians are building a nuclear weapon or not. And that's paraphrasing, but and he said, I don't know either. But then he said, and I'm quoting him almost exactly, but if they're not, they are crazy. And it's perfectly obvious why. The U.S. invaded Iraq for no reason. Just because it wanted to. There was no, obviously Iraq was not threatening the United States. Everybody knew it was crazy at the time. So if you're Iran and you want your regime to survive, if you want the Islamic Republic to exist, you better develop a nuclear weapon. Well, they actually, and people say the Iranian regime is irrational, and I always say, they are irrational, but not in the way that you think. They're irrational in the sense that they should have had some self-preservation and developed a nuclear weapon, like Martin von Krevel recommended. Well, now I just can't imagine a situation where they don't now. And now you have a nuclear-armed state of Israel facing across from a nuclear-armed Iran. Again, I just don't see how this ends well. And the only way it does end well is, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but Americans have to get control of the United States. If we don't, there won't be much to fight over in the future.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack here. I think one side of it is that, okay, so this is one specific point you made, and I would, I'll start here. I think one of the ironies of Israel's current kind of pushes against Iran is that it I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So you have what's going on in Iran, and it's unclear to me as someone looking from afar, maybe particularly because in the U.S. we often have very biased sources, I think, when it comes to Iran. But like you have the government, but the government is, many people in Iran do not like the government. So you have
for sure, yeah,
the kind of the current tension. You were talking about how like you're personally not a big fan of the Iranian government. You don't like clerical rule and stuff like this. So, and like we're definitely seeing widespread protests. We've seen that for a long time, but in the last couple of months, we've seen a big push in that direction. Part of me wonders if Israel, and this has happened in other governments, other countries, other times in history, where Israel saying, we're going to come after you, we're going to make sure we're going to like you said, making sure it's clear that this is we're going to unilaterally destroy you, like that's the end state goal. If that would make it harder for people to kind of rally behind like creating a new government in Iran, that can have the effect of causing people to rally behind the current government, type of existential threat like that. That's a big concern I have in all of this. With how
did we, when I was a college freshman, gay people cannot get married in the United States. Did Iran bomb the United States to instill gay rights in the United States? It's absurd. There were, let's see, transgender people, trans people could get, sexual, what's the right term? Gender affirming surgery in Iran in the 70s. In the 1970s. Should Iran have bombed the United States because trans people weren't even acknowledged to exist here until about 2005? That's idiotic. And it's so insane to say out loud, right? Like nobody would think that. Nobody in their right mind would ever say, oh yeah, I want my country to be bombed to enhance human rights protections. Like that is the dumbest, most lunatic ass, like that no one on earth has ever said this, But when it comes to, idiotic pundits who don't know anything about the world, have never been near violence, don't know anything, making up nonsense on TV, they say, oh, but doesn't Iran repress its own people? Yes, Iran represses its own people. The U.S. government just shot 2 people dead. Didn't they? Like right now, the claim is that Iranians are going out and protesting. It's a bit more complicated than that, but, not now, like there's the war, but before. The claim was that Iranians went out and protested and the government just mowed them down. It's not actually how it happened, or at least as far as anybody could tell. It's, again, kind of a black box because we don't have good sources on Iran, like you said. But in the United States, the federal government literally invaded Minneapolis, right? It put the whole place under siege, shot 2 people dead, shot plenty of people, but shot 2 of them dead for clearly no reason on video, broadcast to the whole world. Did anybody call on any other country to invade the United States? Like literally, do you think a single human being advocated that on the entire planet? No. It's just transparently stupid, So yeah, when the Israelis, and furthermore, suppose China said, because of Minneapolis, we're going to invade the United States, what do you think would happen? The people of Minneapolis would say, okay, look. We want what we want, and you ICE people want what you want, but we can't get killed. We can't get blown up and taken over by China. So we gotta figure something out and work together here, okay? Of course that's what's gonna happen. It's just transparently stupid. The U.S. launched, again, the details aren't exactly clear, but the U.S. Seems to have dropped this ordinance called the MOAB. I think it stands for Massive Ordnance Penetrator. So I can't remember, but it's apparently the largest conventional weapon in the United States arsenal. Apparently, it dropped it on Tehran today, to the point that some people actually thought a nuclear weapon had gone off. Is that gonna make people say, oh, what we should do now is overthrow our government? the only thing stopping more bombs from dropping on us, the only entity that could possibly shoot one of these planes out of the sky, the only entity that might be able to lob a missile back and kill Benjamin Netanyahu or destroy Israeli airplanes, the only entity that could possibly sink a ship. Is that how are people morons? Does everyone think Persians are just stupid or something? Like, none of us would react this way under these circumstances. It's just stupid. I've never, every time I hear people say this nonsense, I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. You know, it's such a bizarre claim that, it's exactly like you said. Won't that cause people to rally around the flag? Yeah, of course it will. What else would it do?
Well, yeah, and speaking to give a more direct analogy, the rally behind the flag was literally what happens with I guess the attacks that Israel experienced a couple of years ago, and now what Israel's done in response.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like there were huge protests against the Netanyahu government for its judicial changes and stuff like that. Then I melted away for a full year.
Arguably, it's the only reason why Netanyahu's still in power. He might.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a final question for you, which is, where should anyone go who wants to learn more about your work? I guess there's two parts of this. There's to learn about your work specifically, and then maybe also learn about some of the dynamics you've been talking about. Now, we just significantly broadened our scope, so I guess we'll say stuff in Palestine for now and sources on that, and then if you know anything about places you'd recommend for some of the bigger kind of Middle East and Iran stuff we've been talking about at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. If I write something or make or like give a talk or something, I'll put it on Twitter and Instagram. So if somebody wants to find me, it's Feroze Sidhwa. Or on Twitter, it's Feroze Sidhwa, and on Instagram, it's just F Sidhwa. And then I'm on Upscrolled with F Sidhwa too, I think, or F Sidhwa as well, not the number 2. I think those are the things I have. But yeah, but I don't, I honestly don't post all that much. It's just if I happen to do something. So, but if people want, I honestly think that the best, like real-time news source right now is actually Dropsite News. It's Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm's outfit. I don't know how they have managed to get such a huge network of reporters all across the globe, but the only Western journalist that has been to the girls' school that was bombed in Iran, as far as I know, is from Dropsite News, and he was there in like 2 hours after the bombing. That's pretty remarkable. They have a network of people all over the place. They don't have the same preconceptions or, idiotic view of the world that CNN or something like that has. You can learn a lot from Al Jazeera or something like that, but Dropsite is really specifically, I'm an American, and I always assume I'm talking to Americans, which is probably a bad assumption. But if you're an American, I really think Dropsite is the way to get useful news on a real-time basis. But then, I mean, to have, but a real-time understanding of, this happened, that doesn't help you develop an understanding of the world. And, to do that, you have to read. It's I know nobody likes to read, anymore, but, you look like a reader. I bet you read. See, there you go. You gotta pick up a book, unfortunately. If people want to read, a book that will provide for them a foundational understanding of the dynamics of the U.S., especially the U.S.'s involvement in the Israel-Palestine conflict. The book I would recommend most reading is Noam Chomsky's Fateful Triangle. I think it was last updated in 2016. It's a very old book. It was written in 1983. But nothing, the dynamics that he describes, the reasons for things, he describes it very, very accurately, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not the expert here, but There's plenty of, and there's no shortage of good work on the Israel-Palestine conflict. There's no shortage of nonsense on it either, unfortunately. But I also mentioned Sara Roy's book. If people want to know about Gaza specifically, and especially what's been done to Gaza under Israel's occupation, this is prior to October 2023. Sara Roy's book, The Political Gaza Strip, The Political Economy of De-Development, is probably the best one to look at there, at least in English. I'm sure there's more in Arabic, but I can't read that. For people who want to know kind of a political military history, not military, but a geopolitical history of Gaza, Norman Finkelstein's book, Gaza, it's called Gaza: An Inquest into Its Martyrdom. I didn't edit that one for Fink, but I edited some of Finkelstein's books for University of California Press and stuff like that. That book is a pretty good summation of what is, the book, the first line of the book is actually, this book is not about Gaza. This book is about what has been done to Gaza. And he could have said this book is about what we have done to Gaza. He doesn't focus on the U.S. actually, which I think is a mistake, but, it's hard to miss the role of the U.S. But no, that there's one thing I do think people should know is that it is, the Israel-Palestine conflict, I would assume, or I shouldn't say I would assume, I'm guessing is the most heavily studied conflict in the world after World War II.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I can't imagine what else would even come close. And there are enough books on it to fill a library. Like you can't possibly read all of them. I haven't read all of them. You have to read selectively, obviously, but you do not need a PhD in any of this to understand that bombing a girls' school is just wrong. It was clearly, it's important that nobody's even claimed it was a mistake. Like it wasn't actually, it's not even clear if the US or Israel did the bombing. They're both using the same munitions, so nobody would probably be able to tell. But but no one's even claimed it was a mistake. No? Again, that tells you something. So if we're bombing children's schools on purpose, we should stop. That's very obvious. You don't need to read 2 words to figure that out. Everybody understands that intuitively, and that's what we're doing. Again, no one even denies it at this point. I did I wrote a series of articles for Zateo. It's another American news website. About what we actually know about the death toll in Gaza. And the best estimate that I can come up with, it's not, very, very little is actually known about the question because no one cares to actually figure it out. But the best estimate that I can come up with is somewhere in the realm of 200,000 people were killed in Gaza. If that's right, and again, it could be higher, it could be lower, but if that's right, that includes 70,000 children. There's the stadium in Santa Clara near where I live is a 70,000 person stadium. So enough dead children to fill an entire stadium, an entire American football stadium of dead kids. Does that sound like a war? Does that sound could anybody possibly think that sounds like a legitimate use of military force? You don't need to read all that widely to figure that out, No, I'm not telling people they shouldn't read. Please, I wish people read more, but you just don't need to have a PhD level of understanding of this to understand that what we're doing is insane and we need to stop.
Yeah, this makes sense. Well, I guess thanks for taking the time now, and hopefully something will change that will lead to a stop. Even if, like you said, I'm also not, like you said a long time ago, I'm not optimistic that will happen, but I still hope it will happen. And
I hope so too. And the only way it will happen is if people like you keep making, keep trying to reach people with the shows like this. So it's good.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. And I'm going to try to include the links to everything you just said for any viewer in the below. I'm going to try to include as much of it as I can. Yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks. You too.